Welcome, everyone. My name is Maria Conicelli, and I am the Chief of Staff at the Family Online Safety Institute. Thank you for joining us today as we explore the important roles that emotional intelligence and educational technology can have on learning and development. We have an impressive lineup of speakers on today's panel, each of which will share their individual expertise and knowledge. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, FOSI is an international nonprofit organization that works to make the online world safer for kids and their families. We convene leaders in industry, government, and the nonprofit sectors to collaborate and innovate new solutions and policies in the field of online safety. A few housekeeping reminders before we begin. Please feel free to submit questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the webinar. We will do our best to address as many of those as possible. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available to view on our YouTube channel later this week. And finally, I wanted to plug two upcoming events. On Wednesday, September 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern, please consider joining us for a FOSI Briefs the Hill webinar about congressional action on online safety and privacy bills. And our FOSI 2022 annual conference, Trust and Assurance, Online Safety in an Uncertain World, will take place on Monday, November 14th at the Intercontinental Hotel at the Wharf in Washington, D.C., and I hope to see many of you there. With that, I'm delighted to introduce Laura Tierney, founder and CEO of the Social Institute and the moderator for today's panel discussion.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Maria, and to the whole team at FOSI for bringing us all together today. I know as educators, we are busy. We are busy, and we appreciate you taking time to be with us today to hear from the three amazing panelists who are coming together to share a lot of their the trends and challenges and solutions that they're seeing. And we had a chance to huddle in preparation for today's session, and I can't wait for you all to hear some of the trends and ideas that they are thinking about and their organizations are thinking about for what's going on at the intersection of EdTech and emotional intelligence among students. So if you are here to talk about that topic, you are in the right place. And we're gonna have a jumpstart today's discussion. A lot of great questions to get to. Would love to throw it to each of the panelists. Richard, we'll start with you, followed by Jamika and then Amy. And if you like to, I'm gonna put some social media handles as well in the chat. So in case y'all want to follow them on Twitter as they're sharing a bit more about their background. Richard, we'll start with you.
Awesome, sounds good. Thank you. Excited to be able to be here. Laura, how do you want me to focus the first bit here? I want to make sure we're going in the direction that you want.
Yeah, if you can just share a little bit more about your background, okay, your role at ISTE, and the connection to education technology and emotional intelligence.
On it. I don't want to get too. This is an exciting topic for me. It's a wind me up and watch me go topics. I don't want to get too far ahead of our conversation.
Let's do it.
But great to see everybody that's joining today. I'm excited to be part of this fantastic panel. So the organization I run is ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education. We're about a 45-year-old nonprofit organization. We help really infuse and accelerate innovation in education. But one of the things that some people may not be aware is that we host a group coalition, which is called the Digital Citizenship Coalition. And we focus on helping to make sure we are helping create effective practices for the use of technology in homes and schools. We believe that both have to be aligned. If we have conditions, principles being taught in schools that are not at home, or vice versa, it's not helpful for kids who are kind of in whiplash between the two. And so we want to make sure that we're setting that out. And so it's a topic that is very very interesting to me. I'll also mention, just on a personal note, last year I wrote a book called Digital for Good, and it is a whole set of guidelines, about 100 tips and guides for families to help set up more healthy conversations about the use of technology. And the main push that I have there is to not focus on all the don'ts, but also on the do's. What are the things we need to be doing in order to help our kids be effective members of a digital world? There you go.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for being with us today, Richard. Jamika, we'll throw it to you.
Hi, everyone. Can we just go ahead and crown Richard King of EdTech? Because I got to shout out 45 years. I'm not even 45 years old in the organization. It's 45 years. That's super amazing. Didn't know that. Jamika Anderson. I am a media literacy educator. Have been working in the field for about 15 years now. I started a grassroots organization called I Am Not the Media about 12 years ago that focused on teaching media literacy and media creation to adolescents. Since then, have been immersed in media literacy, digital media literacy, critical media literacy, all things media literacy in a nutshell. So my education background is in EdTech, online learning and development. Just recently received my PhD in curriculum and instruction. Yes, thank you. And my focus is on critical media literacy, specifically with Black girls. I have to shout out my book too, because Richard did his plug, and I just so happened I got my copy right here, fresh, okay? Thanks, I see you laughing, Amy. Just published by ALA, New Editions, Neil Schumann. Power Lines, connecting with teens in urban communities through media literacy. I wrote this book with co-author Kelly Zarnicki, who was the former YALSA president. And so it just provides a lot of insight on doing media literacy in urban communities, also addressing some of the challenges and disparities in those communities with those students. But then there's so many reflections from stakeholders in the field, and also case studies of media literacy programs that have been done in libraries. So check that out. That's all for me, Laura.
Awesome. Awesome. We're going to come back to that amazing book, and we want to hear more about some of those takeaways that you have and pulled together. Thank you, Jamika. Amy, round us up. We'll throw it to you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Amy Kuster. I am here today as the president of the Association for Library Service to Children, also known as ALSC, which is a division of the American Library Association. And if you don't know what ALSC is, don't worry. If you know what, say, the Newbery Award is or the Caldecott, those are awards administered by our library division. So we've been for well over 100 years really focused on how libraries can support kids and families and position them to succeed, whatever that means for them, to live healthy, productive lives. So one of the things that I've done with ALSC is I was a co-author on a white paper called Media Mentorship in Libraries Serving Youth, and really focusing for the last 7-8 years around this idea of media mentorship, which was a term coined by Lisa Guernsey at New America, the sense that, in any sort of new landscape, it behooves people to have support, people who can lend an ear to hear what you're going through, provide advice. And in the same way that libraries have been a third space and a mentor around what's great to read, meeting your information needs, media is just a new landscape for that. And so it's something that libraries can do and kind of bridge between that school and home, as Richard and Jamika were sharing. So in my day job, I work at the Skokie Public Library. So I also have the practitioner perspective, and I'm really excited to be part of this conversation today.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we will cover a lot in the time that we have together. And the topic of this panel today is focused on emotional intelligence, 21st century classrooms, looking at student well-being and the intersection of those key themes. I will be coming with the perspective of over the last few years, I've had the chance to huddle with tens of thousands of students across the country as the founder and CEO at the Social Institute. We believe in supporting student well-being and their ability to navigate social media and technology positively, because it is how they are social and it is not going away. Thankfully, it is not going away, because technology can have an incredible influence on our lives. And that's where we will start. Is let's look at some of the greatest challenges that the 21st century classroom is experiencing today. And Amy, Jamika, Richard, I know all of you shared different challenges related to your own experience and what you're seeing. And so maybe Amy, we will throw it to you first. When you think about a key challenge for 21st century classroom and its intersection with technology, what comes to mind for you? What are you passionate about seeing solved?
Yeah, what we really see a lot of in my library and in libraries across the country is folks knowing that this can be a really productive tool, but not necessarily knowing how to navigate it. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about, that we're seeing lots more library workers taking up and advocating for, how to help bridge that knowledge of, here's how, if there's anything that young people are great at, it's using technology for the things that they want to. But that's just the tip of the iceberg for how these tools can be productive and enjoyable. And I think one of the pieces as well is that, I know the term like digital native is outdated and it doesn't quite capture, the nuances of how we can learn to use technology. But we definitely see when we have teachers or parents come into libraries say, I feel out of my element. And so this sense of how can we help folks to see the opportunities and effective practices to use these technology tools in ways that fit into their lives, aren't just like an extra thing to add to the to-do list, but also can really help them meet their needs, as opposed to just kind of an external checklist of here's what you should be doing.
Amy, I must say that I totally agree with that. I literally, within the last year, me and another colleague, we actually created this term called digitally limited learners, just because of that. We look at youth as being these digital natives, but we understand that technology is a tool, right? And that tool can be utilized to engage with entertainment, information. And so we literally had a conversation about students when they know TikTok, but not how to use Google Docs, right? So knowing that just because you have that technology, just because you utilize it, does not mean that you know how to use that tool in different ways, or even more sophisticated ways, such as which may demand for using tech for learning, or EdTech, which we're here, right? And so there's certain skills and protocols and things that come out to play with that. So many structures that come out to play. Do you have support at home if you need help with the learning aspect of how to use technology? So I definitely love that you brought that up. I want to jump in, Laura, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
That I think that we've learned that teachers, and not just teachers, all of us, even me a little bit, are tired. We're so tired with the tech. We're Zoom tired. We're Zoom fatigued. There, I even saw a question come up with, everyone's using tech, but where's the balance here? We're tired. So I think that there's a need to really look at ways that we can find balance with tech use in education and conversations about that, but also what are some efficient ways to do it? I'm being bombarded as an educator to implement tech, do this with tech. Not getting the training, that's a whole nother conversation, but what are some efficient ways that I can do this? What are some efficient tools so I don't have to spend hours on the internet just searching for the right tools, the most effective tools to implement in my classroom? And so one of those solutions that I will say, and I did not mention this, I actually am the project manager for an initiative called the Cyber Citizenship Initiative through the National Association of Media Literacy Education, and in partnership with New America and Cyber Florida. And we are building a one-stop shop repository where we do that work for educators, where we go through the internet and we pull all of these resources together to make it easy and efficient for educators to look for those digital tools to teach about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation in their classroom. So we're seeing the need for more platforms like that to make learning, but teaching also easier for the educators because they're tired.
I feel like yes, we are going to come back to that point of just fatigue and how technology can contribute to that, or it can chip away at that. And I mean, Richard, it goes along to the point that you were also sharing that, like, with learning following a 2-year pandemic, with so much technology being thrown, the learning can become very serious, and the experience can be less fun and engaging for students, when actually I feel like technology can enable so much fun and so much learning. Could you share a bit more about that challenge that we were talking about originally?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that happens in the face of a lot of disruption and chaos, and we've seen how disruptive and how really traumatic the last couple of years have been, especially for certain families. We realize that we have a lot of challenges, and so we go into serious mode, and we go into double down on the memorizing, dividing fractions or whatever it is that we need to do to close these learning gaps, however we like to talk about them. And unfortunately, I feel like part of what has happened because of that is that learning has gotten very serious, and it's felt very, almost, I don't know what the right word is, but as I go into schools, there's this heaviness that we're starting to feel, and unfortunately, that actually, we know that one of the conditions for learning to be most effective is for it to feel engaging and for it to feel joyful, right? We actually need that. And so I think one of the things that we have to do, whether we're using technology or not, by the way, is we just need a massive infusion of joy back into our learning process. And that's not to avoid the problems. It's actually because of all of the problems that we need in this infusion of joy, because if not, it's going to be very hard to get the buy-in from learners, right? The emotional sort of buy-in that we need in order to be much more efficient and effective in our learning. And so we have to keep that forefront. We have to think about how teachers, we have a big event. We bring about 20,000 educators together every year. And we had a discussion about it, sort of a challenge for them about how to think through how they can find joy and bring more joy into their learning. Because if we can't find a way to do that, it's going to be very, very hard for us to get out of this difficult kind of mode that we're in.
Yeah, that, if I can jump in, like, that makes me think about like a principle in public librarianship of like, don't just expect people to come to you, like go to where the people are. And it strikes me that like the need for more joy in learning, and the fact that so many young people are using technology for things that they're enjoying, like that's a digital public forum where like we can go and meet them where they are, where teachers can like tap into networks and tools that people are already doing, rather than saying like, all right, here's the app everybody needs to use, don't forget your login, come to us. And thinking of it as like the give and take of relationships in different places to go and be together, I think could really be a framework that can help us not only bring some of that joy back into learning, but also tap into the social emotional pieces that we're talking about.
Yeah, all three of you mentioned in a way of like fatigue on faculty and so much technology hitting them when the pandemic set on. And Richard, you brought up the point of like students were also like are being thrown into technology in different situations, and you see rates of students getting more and more access to technology at earlier and earlier stages. And so how can a classroom, Jamika, like back to your point about balance, like how can a classroom ease students into technology and set up standards, maybe like not even just here are the rules you live by. It's like, here are the standards that we have for how we use technology when students' emotional intelligence may be, developmentally very different, from grade to grade, from student to student.
It's a great question. It's one we need to spend a lot more time talking about. We moved very quickly into providing a lot more access to technology to a lot of young people. And by the way, I think that was a great thing to do, right? It allowed school to continue. It allowed, it actually minimized some of the disruption that would have existed if we hadn't been able to do that. But at the end of the day, it was a very fast transition. And I don't think we did enough work around saying, hey, let's set up some norms and guidelines here. And one of the things that's really critical, and I want to share this actually is a question, so I'll check two boxes because I'm answer one of the questions is in the Q&A. One of the questions was, it says, with all due respect, Mr. Collada, my book is called Digital for Good. Why not? Where's the book on digital for bad, right? And it would be a very big book. Well, what I'll share about this is, in all of the research that I've done, that is all of the conversation that we're having with kids is digital for bad, right? It's the predominant response that I saw when we talked to teachers and parents about how they talk to their kids is very negative. It's what I call the list of don'ts. Don't share your password, and don't be a jerk, and don't spend so much time online, and don't play that game, and don't. It's this list of don'ts. And there are two fundamental problems with that. One is, no kid wants to hear that. It's incredibly annoying. It just shuts kids off. So that's the first thing. But the second, and this is the more important of the two, is learning to be an effective digital citizen, learning to be an effective user of technology in a community, in a digital world, is a complex skill. It takes practice, just like any other complex skill, like playing the piano or learning a sport or learning a new language, right? It's a complex skill. And you have to practice doing any complex skill. Well, you can't practice not doing something. So if I'm told, imagine playing the piano. If I went into a piano lesson and I was just told, here are all the wrong notes not to play. Great, you can tell me that all you want, but at some point, if I'm going to learn to play a piece, I'm going to actually have to practice playing the right notes, you see? And so this negative narrative that we have, the don'ts narrative, has actually made it's highly dysfunctional. And it has led us to a place where we have taken away the opportunity for kids to practice what we want them to be doing. And so that's why my book is called Digital for Good. It's why our conversation needs to be articulate what we want them to be doing. And that's the key, right? If at home, your list is all a list of don'ts, if at school, I've seen, one of the things I like to do when I visit schools is to pull their acceptable use agreements or whatever they're called. They all have different names, responsible use agreements. I love looking at them. Some of them, I was at a school the other day, it was 35 don'ts and not a single do. Not a single do. If we can't articulate the things we want our kids to be doing with technology, then of course they're going to be doing stuff that we don't agree with. And so we have to flip that narrative, and we have to say, here's what we expect you to do. We expect you to use these devices to find information that will help our classroom conversations be more meaningful. We expect you to use those devices to help fact check. We expect you to use them to stay connected to experts and peers as you learn to be part of the digital world. We expect you to use them in ways that make your community better and solve problems. That's what we need to be doing. This running around saying all the don'ts, it actually doesn't help us prepare kids for this digital world. And it's on us, y'all. We've got to switch that narrative if we want to help see things get better in the future.
And I love hearing that right at the beginning of a new school year too, because, educators have the ability to kind of set the norms to start off with. And one of the pieces that we really try and emphasize in the library when we're talking to hesitant parents or teachers is don't forget the agency of the students themselves, especially the older that they get. Not only what norms are you establishing at the beginning of the year, but how do they want to use these things? What sort of a community do they want to build with these tools? It's going to support their development in ways that we have been doing for decades, beyond decades, but also allowing them to have that agency that is so imperative to their development as digital citizens. And I know Jamika has so much more to say around that.
Yes, definitely. I'm soaking everything in that Richard is saying, but I love how Richard was throwing out how right now, the way everything has been structured, that we specifically like to focus on the negatives, but there's so many positives. There's a reason that youth and kids gravitate towards technology and social media and even online gaming. there's so many aspects there that we should look at as affordances and really evaluate, okay, wow, what are these affordances offering for these youth? And how can we learn from that and better our education to make it more fun, like you said, Richard, make it enriching? Because let's just be clear, for the most part, I think when you ask most kids, do they enjoy school? I think we know the majority of their answers. So how do we enrich those experiences? What are we learning from technology and why they're going to these spaces willingly? Okay, there's community. Maybe there's also there's agency, like Amy said. There's also the ability to have their voices shared. New media affords those opportunities that traditional media didn't. Community, collaboration, agency, the ability to share your thoughts and opinions. Okay, we get that now. We know these affordances. How do we teach them how to do it in the right, positive ways, right? So that's where the education needs to come in, not to look at bad, don't do it, don't get online, don't use tech, but what are these affordances that we can now glean and incorporate in education to make it more enriching for these kids? So I love this conversation.
And Jamaica, on that point, it reminds me of a question that a student once posed, and also one that we received in the chat about the how. I remember a student in high school, she's like, Laura, I get it. I get it that I can use technology in all these not so good ways. I could ruin my reputation. I can take something out of context and make me feel stressed or anxious. Like I can cyberbully other people and create online drama. There's all these negatives, and I understand it makes sense for me to use technology positive, but tell me how. How do we go about doing that and answering that how? It's like the students, they know the why, but how do we bring that to life? And so I'd love to pose to an open discussion for the panel is like, how do you all recommend going about teaching emotional intelligence and soft skills through technology? Who would like to start?
I'll jump in. I know with the work that I've done for the last 10 plus years with I Am Not the Media, we do outreach programming where we go into schools and we do that specifically. And I would say one of the key ways in which we do it is one, I like to say this, I like to make programming for youth. And it's kind of what Amy said earlier, like go to where the youth are. What are they interested in? I like to make my programming and my educational experiences sexy. And so I don't want to say we're doing media literacy 101. No, we're doing Turn It Up Teen Radio, okay? And what we're going to do with Turn It Up Teen Radio, because I know all of you all want to be radio personalities. You want your voices to be heard, right? And you like collaborating and communicating, but you're also learning these skills about primary resources, how to piece together an article, because you can't just get on the radio and just talk about whatever. You can't be based off opinion. You have to do your research. So there's skills that are being learned and acquired. So we're teaching media literacy skills in a way that's fun and feels like play and meeting them where they are. But at the same time, they're learning all of those aspects of how to navigate online. They're learning, and they're learning it without even realizing. And then when we reflect, oh, yeah, I did learn that. Oh, that was important. Oh, wow, yes, I did advocate. So these are skills that we're incorporating them while meeting them where they are, as Amy shared earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes me think of a program series that we've done here at my library called The Media Wants Your Brains, and they can't have them. So, working with teens on like, what are some clickbaity type stories that you've probably seen? So, people talking about like, what's that gossip about that celebrity, and using that, like things that they're already talking about in our spaces, and using just some like screens and tech tools to explore, kind of gamify it. And what we found, it really like scaffolded with this concept from Mimi Ito called Homago. So H-O hanging out, M-A messing around, G-O geeking out. So kind of like 3 tiers of like, you're just in a space getting a feel for it. And then you like play around a little bit, and then you can ultimately like go deep. And that maps so well with thinking about supporting young people around technology and like digital learning, social development, because what we saw in that is like, we had so many people would just come and just play maybe one round and like guess, what's guess they were actually developing those skills. But then we started to have like some teens who were like, oh, I saw this news story. Can we explore that one? So like they were messing around with the concepts a little bit. And at the end, like we had people like wanting to develop their own like version of this. You know, some of it was like, I want to try and gotcha my friends. But ultimately, they were applying all of those skills because we provided an opportunity for them to like explore and then dig deeper in a way that worked for them. And so one of those pieces is like, it's the relationships that we have. The same way you help people, you know, young people develop their social skills in person is through talking things through and exploring. Same thing applies to digital social relationships. But then beyond those relationships, it's just the opportunity to kind of engage in practice, as we talked about earlier.
There's more I could say, Laura, though. If you need to move us on, let me know.
No, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear it.
So one of the things that I think is really critical, and I agree with the previous comments, and I'm going to add just one thing to it, which is one of the skills we really have to help young people figure out is how to find balance in a world where there is so much demand for their attention all the time. And that in and of itself is a complex skill. Like we just need to, and for all of us, by the way, we're talking about kids, but there's so much demand for our time. There's far more demand for our time than we have time in any given day to give to anything. And so helping young people figure out how to find balance in their lives is really critical. And one of the things, you know, an outdated model that was used in the past was something that we often refer to as screen time. In fact, when I talk to families or teachers, the number one question I get is, my kid is blank years old, how many hours of screen time is appropriate per day? The challenge with that, and if you notice, both World Health Organization, the U.S. Department of Education have all changed their language around this. The challenge with that is it teaches that all technology, anything that happens on a screen, is of the same value, and that is, you know, nothing could be farther from the truth. I think we could all agree on that, right? There are some activities that we say these are highly valuable activities for you, and then some activities that are frankly just a waste of time. And context matters too. So if I'm on a 8-hour car drive, maybe playing Candy Crush for a bit ain't so bad, because what else am I going to be doing, right? If it's a beautiful day and I have homework assignments due for school the next day and a bunch of friends that I could be playing with outside, playing 8 hours of Candy Crush would be totally inappropriate. And so we have to be really clear that we're not using this sort of screen time language as much as we're evaluating individual activities and talking about their value. One of the ways that I describe this, and I share this in my book, is that I compare it to food. And if we have food time, right? Imagine like screen time, we had food time. And so we say between 6 and 7 o'clock, it is food time. And you can shove whatever you want in your face for an hour, as long as at 7:01 you are done with food time. Of course not. Like we're not, my kids would shove Twinkies in their mouth for an hour and then be done. No, that's not what and it's food, right? It's food time, it's food. No, we need to say, look, we need to eat some vegetables. We need to eat some proteins. Maybe we have a Twinkie at the end, but that's a little bit of Twinkie, and it's at the end of eating healthy food. And we teach that when we finish eating, it's not because the timer went off, it's because we feel full. We recognize that we've had enough to eat. That's the principle that we need to be applying to our digital world. Not all digital activities are created equal. And some of them, it would be very appropriate. My kids read on their devices. Very appropriate to take a good chunk of time for reading. And in my family, playing mindless games that aren't helping them, that's the Twinkie. That's where just a little bit is probably plenty. But that idea of broad brush, it teaches our kids that all tech is created equal, and we have to break that cycle. And we have to say, let's talk about this particular activity. Is this activity worth the amount of time you're spending? If not, let's suggest other things to do, either digitally or physically, that are better use of your time.
Richard, I have to add on one more thing to that. And I'm sorry, Laura, just one more thing. And it connects to this whole conversation. It's also teaching the skill of assessing your emotional intelligence with how you're engaging with that technology. That's a key skill that's also necessary. I'm always promoting that with youth. if you are engaging with technology and it is causing you to be scattered and distracted, or if it's making you not feel so good inside, you know what I mean? That is a valuable assessment that we need to continue consistently make. And we have to encourage and empower our students to do that. Give you a great example. My daughter did this and it blew my mind. So this was a couple of months back where I was asking her, I said, hey, because I follow her on TikTok. I'm like, hey, you haven't been posting on TikTok. What's going on? And she's like, oh, I actually removed the app from my phone. I said, oh, you did? She said, yeah, it was some bullies and they were saying some things and it was negative energy. It was just negative energy. And I just had to take the app off for a while. I said, kudos to you, right? For assessing how you felt, having the agency, knowing you have the agency and ability to remove yourself from that situation or remove the app. You have the ability. And so it was very important for me to empower her to know that. That's the thing about technology. It's a tool. You can decide to put it away, or you can decide when to log it back on or power it back up. And so granted, she's back on TikTok right now and she's having fun, but she knew how to assess. It's not making me feel so well right now. I think I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to remove the app from my profile. So I think that that's another key skill that we should make sure that students have in their toolkit.
I love the question. I'm just going to underline this, that question that you just said, which is, how does this make you feel? That is such a good question to be asking our kids. How does this happen? And remember, it's not screens, it's not everything. It's this particular app. How does TikTok make you feel? How does whatever? I don't care, whatever it is. Just getting them to reflect on that, so powerful. And so I love that. I think we need to do a lot more of asking. And I have found I am blown away by how attentive young people are, how thoughtful they are about this sort of stuff. And when you ask them good questions, how does it make you feel? How do you respond when you see something happen that's not that you don't like? We get really good answers. I think we don't give them sometimes as much credit as we need to for recognizing how they're feeling on virtual spaces.
Well, and I think what that connects with is what we would consider like the third C in media mentorship. So when Richard talked about the content and the context, then there's also the child. Or a young person. You don't have to think like young child, but, alliterative 3 Cs. And that like each child is going to be different. The needs are different. They can change with context again. So like Jamaica's example of her daughter in TikTok, not great at one point, great at another time. And trying to say that all tech is the same, all context is the same, but also the needs or interests or like feelings of each child are the same, really prohibits us from getting nuance about this and figuring out what's going to be the best tool for the specific situation and person in front of us.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that, Amy, the idea of identifying possible tools that the three of you also have found helpful, whether it be in your own life as an educator or when it comes to teaching soft skills. We had a question come in about different apps, kind of resources out there. And I want to center it on this thought before we answer this, is that you think about texting, it requires social skills. You think about Instagram, Snapchat, they require social skills. You think about email or FaceTime, all of these things require social skills. No matter how you define social media, there is one truth in this, is that it's not going away anytime soon. It's embedded into our lives. And when I say our lives, like the adults as much as it is the students, and we're all learning together. And it's a chance for the students to also coach up and coach us. And we're all on the same team together. And I find that students are just so much more understanding of just seeing it as their social world. And so we know repetition is the mother of learning, right? Repetition is the mother of learning. And so Jamaica, Amy, Richard, what is one way to help students, like what are ways to help students practice this regularly? Are there any like tips or ideas, whether that be a specific resource or just more of a timeless tip? And I'll throw one out there to get us started. I know many schools are teaching social skills in the most social setting possible. school. It leverages positive peer influence. It leverages positive role models. It leverages strong teacher-student relationships. And it helps students discuss social in the most social setting. They're embedding it into homeroom. They're embedding it into advisory. They're embedding social skill building into academic core classes. That is something timeless, and you don't need to outsource anything in order to prioritize that as a community. Amy, Jamika, Richard, any specific resources or timeless tips that you'd recommend sharing?
I mean, what comes to mind for me is less a resource than an approach, which is don't expect there to be a like one and done sort of solution. It's exactly what you were saying, Laura, and that we've been talking about this whole time. Like it's a process, and that practice, talking about tech, that's the way machine learning works. Like you could set up a chat bot, which is a thing that a lot of us were familiar with from when we were like coming of age on the internet. And like, it doesn't sound like a human until it has hours and hours and hours of practice, right? And even then it still seems weird, at least for now. And it's the same thing for kids. Like you wouldn't expect a high school student to sit down and like be able to write a cover letter. I remember that was an assignment in my junior year of high school. Like it's practice. You have to see examples. You have to like try it, get feedback. And that's a key piece here of like, don't think about, all right, this week we're going to do a unit on like digital social skills. Like that's a thing across the entirety of the year and beyond, because it truly is just in that practice. And for as much as we've heard people concerned about young people from the parts of the pandemic when they were isolated at home of like, oh, they've missed out on all of these social skills, like not wholesale. Yeah, maybe like people are awkward in person. I know plenty of adults who are still awkward in person after that, year and a half or what have you, but they were interacting in those social spaces. And so it's figuring out how those spaces work, what are those norms, and just that deep practice.
I'll jump in. Resources, I gotta go ahead and shout it out again. The Cyber Citizenship Initiative. Please check that out. There's over 1,000 resources on there. And in that space, we're also building community. So educators can join that platform, have conversations about resources, learn and get ideas on how other educators may be utilizing those resources in their classrooms. But I'm gonna go ahead and throw this out there too that you may not be considering. Your community is a resource. There's so many stakeholders now that are investing in tackling the challenges with misinformation, disinformation, and trying to figure out ways to help educators. Everyone's wanting to help educators. You need help, and people want to help you, believe it or not. You may not believe it, but it really is the case. So reach out to your local libraries. I worked in outreach programming for so long in the library, and there are people in the library that are focused on doing outreach programs and want to bring programs to you. And do it with your students. Collaborate with the librarians in your community. Collaborate with your local universities. Collaborate with local tech companies and nonprofit organizations. I'm a grassroots. I had started a nonprofit grassroots. I was always looking for opportunities to come into the schools and do programming. So collaborate, educators, where even if you feel like you may not have the skills, bring those people in that can teach you and your students some of these skills to learn how to navigate. We're in this together. So there's resources, people, the community is out there to be a resource to you. Definitely.
Great. Let me add a resource and an approach. I'll do one of each. So one resource just to be aware of, there's an event that the coalition the Digit Coalition that I mentioned hosts for Digital Citizenship Week in October called Digit Connect, and it's free. Anybody can join it if you want, and it's going to be, there's a whole bunch of different organizations that will share some of the great work that they're doing. So mark that and come if that's helpful. The other part that I'll share is an approach, and that is we have to remember how important modeling is. So if you look at a lot of research on how people learn, yes, what we teach matters, the curriculum matters, it all matters, but what you hear as just by far, one of the most powerful ways that people learn that we often forget about is by modeling. Kids model behaviors that they see from their teachers, from their parents, from other students, which can be good or bad, right? We know that, but so we just know that modeling is very, very powerful. So we need to think a lot about how we're modeling our behaviors for what we want our kids to be, young people to be doing. One of the challenges, so in the physical world, modeling in some ways is a little bit easier. You can see, if we're out on the playground and there's a piece of trash on the ground there, right? I can pick that up and throw it in the trash, and my kids will see I was just picking up and cleaning up our physical space. It's very, very observable. I could be doing a similar version of that virtually. If I'm sitting at my computer and I'm making a comment that's helping somebody who's stuck online, or actually calling out and saying, hey, that's not an appropriate way to respond here virtually, or maybe let's check that with a fact, right? I could be doing that, or helping my community. Hey, here's a blood drive. I'm going to be helping promote that via my social media channels. To a kid that's observing, it just looks like me sitting at my computer. And so we have to be overt in how we are modeling. We have to say things like, hey, I'll be there in a second. I'm actually just finishing this little post that I'm going to put on Facebook to get people to come to the blood drive. Do you want to take a look? Give me your feedback, right? And at first that may seem a little weird, but if we don't do that sort of overt modeling, or saying, hey, I'm gonna fact check this real quick and then post it online here, then our kids don't know, they don't see that we lose that really powerful lever for learning. So please be thoughtful about how are you individually modeling good behavior of being a good member of the digital world. You're doing great things, I know you are, but how are you overtly modeling them so our kids see them just as obvious as they do see when we hold a door open for somebody that has a bag of groceries in their hands?
And Richard, can I just say, how many times you just said we, and in a very inclusive way, like, yeah, we are right there with the students on this one. And what's true is we can't be what we can't see. And the people who surround us influence us greatly, especially when it comes to digital, our use of technology. And so let me play devil's advocate here, y'all. And pandemic, devices drastically increased in the classrooms, right? And teachers were leaning on technology to help students connect and learn while remote and more. And now it could be so easy to just say, let's just make it go away. Let's just confiscate things. Let's dial up the firewalls. Let's take it away from the classrooms. Let's just kind of go back to, it's distracting anyways. Science shows that just having this, right on our table, it distracts us. And so what advice would you give if you are an educator, at a school, and you have some peers who are saying, hey, let's restrict, and instead of empower and equip, let's sort of scare and restrict instead of empower and equip. What advice would you give as you think about kind of like organizational change and where we are going? It is all about balance, Jamika, back to your original point, but what like any tangible advice that you would give for that mindset that can sometimes develop in the 21st century classroom?
I'll jump in. All right. So I was just looking right now at my pencil. Don't judge me. I still use pencils. So I was looking at this pencil, right? Believe it or not, this is technology. Pencil, right? And so when I think about this form of technology can be used by a student that can look at it. If they didn't know it was a pencil, it can be used to stab someone in the eye, right? It can be used to sling, throw, distract others, sword fight, whatever. But I think that we all saw the benefit of what a pencil can do, right? Utilized to write, penmanship, create stories, narratives, share, this is what technology is about. It's a tool. It's a tool. And so as educators, and I'm not putting this just on the teacher, as parents, community, as educators, we have to educate students on how this tool has these benefits and the benefits of this tool, and to not utilize it to stab, to throw, and how to find that balance. So I think that we all have to understand that there are affordances that technology provides for students. And we would be remiss and we would miss out on those affordances, right? To educate students on how they can utilize technology. There's benefits to this technology. The multimodal benefits that it has and provides for learning has also shown with research that it creates opportunities for differentiation in education, to embrace multiple intelligence as students learn differently. Multimodal benefits does that. A student that may be more of a linguistic, I'm a visual learner, so I need to see it. I need to see it. So I need the pictures, and I gravitate and understand better through video. I cannot explain to you how I literally passed my statistics class because of YouTube. I would not have. YouTube saved my life in statistics. So there are benefits to this technology, but if we keep focusing on how students are utilizing this tool, stab, to fling, to distract, we're missing out on so many opportunities. So let's educate students on how to avoid those negatives, how to navigate, and let's focus on how we can leverage those affordances that technology is providing us.
Yes, I agree so much. And like, think about like, what are the consequences of just wholesale, banning or not using devices? Like that doesn't teach anything except that like there's judgment with using these tools. And so like one of the things I would say if I had a peer or a teacher come in and say like, oh, well, we should just get rid of everything. Like I would truly genuinely ask, have you had a thoughtful conversation with your students? Like, how do they find it useful to use these? Like, how can you come up with some community norms that are appropriate for your space? And then you as the authority figure, the guide can check in periodically and make sure those are still working for people. But Richard said it earlier, like young people are really thoughtful about these things, and they're going to share like these are ways that are helpful for us to use these tools, and these are ways that it's not helpful, or maybe it's like distracting, and they can be the best mechanism to hold themselves and one another accountable. And we know that it's just developmentally a process to figure out that self-regulation, that like how you fit in a community. And this is just another aspect of that. And taking away, just saying like this is useless at any point in time really doesn't equip them to be productive users of technology later, because they're getting no support or instruction or guidance, but also it doesn't allow them to develop that skill of figuring out what works for them. What do they need to succeed?
Yeah.
I think we get into a problem in education in a lot of ways, but this is a good example of it, where we treat something that is inherently not binary as binary. And so we get into this, and I spend a lot of time talking to, parent groups and people that are educator groups about this issue. And it's often a question they'll come, we'll say, should we ban the use of technology? It's sort of ridiculous considering the world that we're walking into and how technology driven it is. And so then sometimes people go, oh, well, so you just mean everybody should use technology all the time, all they want without any, no, of course not. Like nobody is saying that. And no, it would be totally inappropriate to have a kid have no boundaries set, no restrictions. It's sort of like I have a 16-year-old who's learning to drive, and some of the gray hair, right? And I don't say, here's the keys to the car, just go anywhere you want all the time, right? But I also don't say you can never use a car, because I actually need her to learn how to use a car appropriately. And so in so many ways, that's the reality. We're in a world where we have to find that middle ground, and it goes in order. So at first, the first time my kid's driving a car, they're driving with me. And then at some point, they're going to get to drive by themselves, but they're going to get to drive in some pretty limited conditions during the day with nobody else in the car, and I know exactly where they're going, right? And then as I see trust, as I see good choices being made, then they get more and more responsibility. But part of that is on us, that we don't set a kid up who's not ready to make the right choices with something that they don't have the ability to do. For a kid who's not shown any ability to manage good use of a device and be responsible with the type of pictures they're taking, I'm not going to get them an Instagram account, right? It's not going to happen. We're going to demonstrate that in ways that I know that's setting them up to make good choices. And when I see that, I say, hey, you're getting mature, you're making good choices, you have shown responsibility. Now let's try giving you a little more autonomy, right? That's the way we do this, whether it's for learning, whether it's in our use of technology at home. The binary thing of bury all the devices in the backyard or everybody gets access to everything, neither one of those is healthy. And we have to keep remembering that it's a process over time where we gradually give more opportunity. And then if there's responsible use, then we gradually give more. And that's how we prepare kids to be healthy members of the digital world.
Yes, yes. Social media education is the new driver's ed, and it's not going away. And the more that we can embed it into our own lives and I think help students practice that, you're building mental muscle for sure. Listen, FOSI brought us, I appreciate FOSI bringing all of us together today, and they are thinking about what's next, what's on the horizon in this field, the intersection of 21st century classrooms, technology, social media, policy, and so much more. There's so many resources that you can, find on their website, whether you are an educator or you are a parent or you are a student. So I'd love to end with the final question, this kind of a sprint question for each of you all to hear. Look in our kind of gaze into our crystal ball, 3 to 5 years from now, we will be successful in building emotional intelligence among students if we fill in the blank. What's in your crystal ball, Amy? I feel like you have something.
Yeah, so I think there's a component of if we're not leading from a place of judgment in the choices that people are making, but rather from a place of being a peer or a mentor or a coach to help people navigate for what they're hoping to achieve. So letting it be relationship based and young person directed.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Jamika, we'll throw it to you.
Wow, Amy took what initially came to my mind. If we collaborate, because there's collaboration that's needed to create this the outcomes we're wanting when it comes to technology use with students. And when I say collaborate, I'm going back to collaborating with your community, tech developers collaborating with educators, allowing them to be consultants and come in, collaboration with children and parents. I'm pretty sure parents, you can learn a lot about technology. My daughter has taught me so much that I just was not afraid to ask, you know what I mean? And she's learned so much from me to help her learn how to navigate. But there needs to be collaboration because we're learning together. Technology is consistently evolving, and we have to lean on each other to learn how to navigate and get through this together. So collaboration.
That's a great one. I often say, digital citizenship is a team sport, and it's got to include everybody across the different different roles in a kid's life. Look, if I had to add one, my crystal ball my hope, I guess, for the future is that we can really reset our conversations with young people about how they're using technology. The conversations that we're having right now, by and large, are not helpful. They are too much us telling them things that they should be doing without understanding the realities of their digital world. It's too much of the list of don'ts without modeling the do's. It's too much binary of all tech, all you want for an hour or nothing, we bury it in the backyard, right? Neither one of those are healthy. It's far too much talking about using technology for entertainment and not nearly enough talking about how to use devices for problem solving. And so that we just need a healthier conversation that is much more engaging with kids, and it talks about what type of humans do we want to be in virtual spaces. That should be the foundation. Who do we want to be in a virtual world? What do we want to be known for? What kind of person do we want to be? That's where the conversation starts. And I think if we can get ahead of that conversation, we get to a much brighter future.
These are such insightful ideas. I hope everyone's taking notes that's attending live, and we appreciate you attending live, being able to share all the questions that you did in the Q&A. And I will wrap by echoing the themes that you all shared. I believe we will be all right and support the emotional intelligence of students if we meet students on their level
and lock arms with students to figure this out, because the students are ahead of the game in this world of technology, and there are older students that are positively influencing younger students. There are students taking advantage of technology to make an impact on their school culture, on their group of peers, and so much more. And we could learn a lot from that. And speaking of, you can't be what you can't see, all of these panelists are on Twitter. So you want to hit that notification button and continue to get updates from them, because I'm just so impressed and just so honored to hear what you all are doing in different industries and different spaces to really look at what does that intersection of technology and social skills and community building look like. So Amy, Jamika, Richard, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom, your insight today. And special thank you to FOSI for bringing us all together. And like Maria shared at the very beginning of this webinar, if you joined a little bit later, is that this recording will be available whether or not you attended live. And you can certainly find more resources on FOSI's website, fosi.org. We really appreciate everyone's time today and looking forward to continuing the conversation. Right.
Great to be with you all today. Thank you.
Awesome.